All right. Welcome to the Field Notes with Rashad podcast. I am here today with two of Missouri's biologists regarding the bobwhite quail, Kyle Hedges and, sorry, Frank, is your last name pronounced Loncarich?
Yeah, Loncarich. That's pretty close.
Loncarich.
Yep.
Got it. Both of these guys, upland hunters, professional wildlife biologists. Your career has been focused primarily on quail, grasslands, and habitat conservation across the Midwest. You guys both have had great careers. If I was to look to draw a kind of a map, 100-mile map or from around where I live in Neosho, Missouri, this is your guys' stomping grounds. You guys kind of born and raised and did a lot of your research in this area. So we're practically neighbors.
Yeah, well, we are. I'm sitting in Neosho right now.
No kidding.
Yeah, I live at Goodman. So,
well, if you ever need a cup of sugar, let me know.
Okay.
Your guys' kind of big project was and started in 2014, where you radio collared about 1,500 quail out here in Southwest Missouri, and I think that was kind of a landmark study that you guys did there. And how I kind of found you was that it was the Upland projects, the Project Upland video, and I didn't even realize that was out in Southwest Missouri. I was just like, the Missouri quail hunting video. I said, oh, that's kind of like, I'll check this out. And then sure enough, I seen it was in Southwest Missouri. I said, oh, wow. So then I watched all the podcasts that you guys did, read a ton of the different articles. And I said, I got to get these guys on my podcast, see if they're open to it. So here we are. Thank you so much for being here. I know you guys have a really busy schedule, so I appreciate you taking the time sort of out of your day. But I always like to see how the hunting season's been going. Kyle, how was your turkey season?
Good. I've got a farm in Kansas, so I always sneak over there and slip in some hunting time, and then came back and hunted Missouri. Kansas usually opens 5 days before Missouri, so it works out good. So yeah, I had a great season. Killed birds in a couple different states.
Frankie ended up doing any turkey hunting this season?
Yeah, was able to get out a fair amount. Got one in Missouri, so fortunate there. So yeah, season wasn't too bad.
Yeah, I love that Kansas season opens up earlier. I ended up actually going out for that early Kansas archery deal that opens on like the 6th. Tagged out in a couple days. So then it's like, you got to sit your butt back down for a little bit and being like, okay, well, I got to wait for Missouri to open now. and then I got lucky down here in Missouri as well. So I was really thankful for that.
That can be a double-edged sword. So I've been to my farm in Kansas, and you get your hind end kicked for about 4 or 5 days before Missouri even opens, And then by the time I come back to Missouri, I'm so frustrated that so when it goes well, it's great. When it goes bad,
yeah. Oh yeah.
Then it sets the stage for, man, I'm already tired of this, and the Missouri hasn't even opened yet. So I've seen both sides of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm a public land guy, so I was over there in Kansas in some of the public land, and I wanted to get it done during the archery season because I just knew that there was going to be a lot of tags in this particular area. There was going to be, there's already some guys scouting. I had a feeling it was just going to get hammered. Frank, how have things been for you? Are you still working for the conservation department?
Yeah, I still work for the Missouri Department of Conservation. It's a grassland coordinator. I've been with MDC for 21 and a half years, and 17 of those I've managed public lands. So
Mm-hmm.
I managed grasslands, whether it was prairies or reestablished grasslands, woodlands, primarily for bobwhite quail, but also did, some turkey and deer management on the side. And whatever we did for bobwhite was good for those two species anyway. So that all worked out. And then I took this grassland job, more of a statewide position where I coordinate our grassland program efforts across the state. Public land efforts, private land efforts, kind of coordinate, working across state boundaries to get more native warm season grasslands and more of a regional aspect, but primarily work to try to get more native grasslands put on the landscape to help a whole host of species that are declining. Grassland species are the fastest declining species of birds that we have. And so the more grasslands we can put on the landscape, the better. And so that's my job today.
No, that's great. And, I was kind of thinking about that earlier, how grasslands are so important for so many different species, but it doesn't have like that cool factor or that wow factor that like gets people excited. Why do you think that is? Or what do you think like we could do to make people more just like excited about seeing an open prairie that's, definitely holding more habitat? I think people see it, and as maybe it's in like an American situation where we're just like, we need to cut that, we need to plant it, we need to do this, we need to do that. Like, what do you think we could do to like make grasslands more just cool and like interesting for people?
Yeah, that's a good question. So grasslands have always had this aspect or this thought among sort of the popular literature, the popular thought, that they're just kind of empty, they're void, and there's not much out there. And spend a day out there and you'll realize that there's a ton out there. There may not be the density of white-tailed deer on grasslands as there is in a woodland setting, but there certainly are deer in grasslands. There may not be the density of turkeys in grassland settings, but turkeys do exist there. They also, they also provide, trying to, getting kind of on the environmental side a little bit. They provide a host of benefits. They provide tons of filtering for carbon, clean water, clean air. They do a lot of those environmental services, that we think forests pick up the load on. Well, that's not exactly the truth. The grasslands pick up a vast majority of carbon, do a vast majority of the water quality efforts, clean air. So they provide a ton of ecosystem services that fragmented landscapes or highly agricultural landscapes don't. And to make grasslands cool, we've got to think about them in a holistic approach about what they can provide. They can provide tons of wildlife for people that are interested in wildlife. If they're a small part of your farm's wildlife plan, grasslands carry an inordinate amount of that wildlife forage, wildlife cover, wildlife nesting, and brood rearing habitat. They also can be used for production, for cattle production, for hay production. So they have this inordinate amount of environmental and ecological services that they provide over and above the size that they are on your outfit or on your land that you're managing. So I think that's how we try to make them cool again, is really preach all of the holistic aspects of grasslands, all the ecosystem services they can provide, and even small grasslands put on a landowner's plot provide really, really great benefits.
Yeah, and I think, as a public land, diehardist for myself, I mean, I'll hunt private every once in a while, but for the most part, it's all public. And I think, if a lot of people, if you're like me, I got happy feet. So it's like, maybe I have a great spot that's holding deer, quail, turkey, whatever it may be, but I'm like, what's always on the other side of that ridge? Or let me go park on the other side of this field here and kind of work my way through it. And, grasslands, it can be a very, very difficult terrain to cover sometimes. But I think we as mobile hunters, people who are, kind of always looking, grasslands are very, very difficult to identify game in. So we kind of want that easy ticket where it's like, if you go, anybody, let's take a Robert Talbot Conservation Area, for example. It's a popular one that people like to go to. There's 20 tree stands over every corn plot because it's easy to identify that that's where the game is. And nobody wants to go cross the river and go sit in the lowlands and sit in that timber there, where it's like, well, that's where the bedding is. That's where your travel corridors are going to be, but you want to catch them while they're feeding. So I think it's that one layer deeper of hunting intensity of like, hey, go into these difficult areas where you just can't see them from the road, spend a little time, burn a little boot leather. And for me, that's, a big part of how I like to do it. I would go ahead.
You make a good point about Talbot, because that's one that I used to manage. I managed that for a long, long time. And the biggest deer the 2 or 3 biggest deer that I ever saw on Talbot was when I was quail hunting. And they were bedded in thicker grasslands. So I wasn't hunting timber, I was hunting grasslands. They were bedded in thicker grasslands. But there were travel corridors, like woody draws nearby or a woody hedgerow nearby that they could travel down, and they were bedding out in the grasslands. And nobody hunted those travel corridors or those woody draws out in the grasslands because, why would you? It looks like there's just nothing but grass. But within that grass, that's the thing. Within that grass, there are other species of forbs and weeds that are growing that are providing tons of forages for these deer. Plus, it's exceptional bedding habitat. So it's interesting you mentioned Talbot because that's a good illustration of just how important and how beneficial these grasslands can be.
Mm-hmm. And I do like Talbot quite a bit. And, I think one of the sentiments that I get from people a lot, I spend a lot of time at bow shops, expos, all sorts of different places, just talking to other sportsmen, other hunters. And, one of the things that I try to do with this channel, whether it's the podcast itself or the Instagram stuff or the YouTube, is kind of help reshape the image about what the conservation department is doing. I've found that it's an easy way for people to get attention on the internet to criticize them. And I oftentimes don't agree with that. It's like the person doing a backflip off a table just to get views. It's like, it's unnecessary and oftentimes misinformed. With that, one of the things that I'm always curious about is the expansion of public land through, in different areas. I know northern Missouri is a totally different kind of beast, but, down here we do have quite a few. But, as the grasslands coordinator, are you participating in the expansion of any public land in these regions?
Yeah. In fact, on my side of the aisle, we're looking for grassland tracts and have acquired some grassland tracts over the last 4 years. Typically, they're in our higher grassland ecosystems or ecosystems of importance. So we've got some areas of the state like Southwest Missouri that has quite a bit of grassland left. That's a high priority. Get to Northwest Missouri, that's a high priority. So yeah, those are places that we're really trying to target our grassland acquisition efforts, and we've done a fair job of acquiring more grassland acres. They tend to help connect grasslands with other grasslands or add on to existing conservation areas that we already have. But we have bought some standalone ground too. And we're still in the process of looking, for more of those tracts as they come available and considering them for purchase, depending on if they fit in with those priorities that we've set out.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we were kind of touching on earlier about this particular habitat is you had mentioned that the ground that we're trying to conserve to expand habitat can also be good cattle ground. A lot of people, like I was saying, look, farmers operate on relatively thin margins, so they have to make sure that they can get, especially the price of cows now. It's like every little piece of land that guys can get their hands on to put a heifer on, they're gonna do. But I think there's a misunderstanding that these two worlds can coexist. You can graze cattle and still be a conservationist for upland birds. Am I correct in that?
Yeah. And a lot of that, most of that highly depends on the forages that you use. If you're 100% tall fescue guy and you're getting maximum utilization out of tall fescue, yeah, it's kind of hard to meet some conservation goals. But if you're willing to add warm season grasses as a part of your mix, or add alternative forages that are more beneficial to grassland species as a part of your operation, then certainly you can benefit wildlife and at a high in a high way. And I know we'll talk about that more as we talk about what we've found with bobwhites. But certainly they can coexist, and we want them to coexist. We want farmers and ranchers to be able to make money. But there are ways where they coexist, and we have those methods. We've shown them in field sites. We've shown them through economic analysis that adding native warm season grasses can be a benefit to your farm, but also be profitable at the same time. So there's certainly ways they can coexist as long as there's some addition of alternative forages, and the forages that you have, you're not trying to get maximum usage out of 365.
So what do you think is like the biggest hurdle when communicating with these farmers or private landowners and kind of making that switch? Maybe, Farmer John has been running a particular type of grass for 20 years on this land, and you're like, hey, you have great grassland habitat. We're doing this work in some surrounding counties. Would you consider switching? Are you finding a lot of kind of pushback on that type of stuff?
Well, it depends. One of the things was it used to take us as practitioners 2 or 3 years to get a good native grass stand, just because of the technology that we've got. Now with new herbicides, we can get a native grass stand ready to be grazed within 1 to 2 years. So landowners don't have to have a loss of production while they wait for that forage to grow as long as they used to have. That's one barrier we've kind of overcome. Another barrier, quite frankly, is drought. When we have a drought, we have almost more requests for native grass plantings on private lands than we can service, because people want that forage, that summer forage that native warm season grasses provide, because their fescue is all burned up. Well, if it keeps raining through the summer, then the fescue can limp them along and get them through until fall. And they think, I don't need that alternative forage. But we know in Southwest Missouri, it's going to get droughty again. So almost a long-term drought would be our best friend in terms of getting more folks signed up for warm season grasses or convinced to make that leap. I'm not asking for a long-term drought. I'm just saying that seems to be, we get enough rain here that we can sustain fescue throughout the growing seasons in a lot of years, and that sort of prevents landowners from really making that jump. But when we do get a severe drought, as in 22 and 23, we couldn't spend enough money to get people to convert some of their property into warm season grass.
Mm-hmm. And I was at so I don't know, I'm a member of I'm on the board member of Missouri's Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, and we had a pint night up in Springfield that was kind of a collaboration with Quail Forever. And I forget the name of the gentleman who I was talking to there, but he was a conservation agent. I mean, essentially, he was a consultant for the state. And I think a lot of landowners don't know, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, they can call the state and get a free consultation on their land for conservation. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. We have private land conservationists across the state that service every county of the state. Will come out, walk your land with you, and give you some ideas on what you can do, write you a plan, get you signed up for state cost share, also get you signed up, get you on the road to federal cost share if that's the way you want to go, if state cost share doesn't quite fit your needs. So not only do we offer that service, that free service, but it's also a way for folks to get introduced into cost share so that the state shares a portion of the cost of establishing those natives on your property. So it's a really great benefit, and there's PLCs or private lands conservationists assigned to every county.
See, and I love that. As a Missouri resident, there's all sorts of different ways that our money gets put towards conservation. And when I think about private land, funds going to private land to help conservation, I'm a huge advocate of. Speaking of that, Quail Forever, Missouri's Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, one of my friends, a board member, Casey Collison out of Springfield, he's a huge fan of your guys' Upland Flush, and he has invited both of you on a woodcock hunt anytime. He said he'd love to have you guys out. So
nice.
We might have to organize something like that in the future. And I'm inviting myself in that hunt there as well.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Well, so one of the things that I thought was really interesting about the study was the focus that you guys had on predators and the predation aspect of it. Kyle, if you wanted to jump in here and get back in the conversation, I'd love to get your sort of input on not only what types of predators we're seeing and what trappers and other, just anybody managing their property can do to kind of make an impact. Because I'm a big waterfowl guy as well. And some people will tell you, you could trap every coon, every coyote on your property, and it might not have that much of an impact, especially in places like a refuge where a coyote can work a ridge and decimate every nest in that area. So what was that you were kind of saying in regards to predators? What types of predators, and what do you think is a realistic solution for people?
Well, that's a lot to unpack. Let's start on the research side and what we looked at. So adult mortality, of course, is a lot different than nest mortality. Adult mortality, our leading cause is avian predators, right? I mean, it was spot on during the hawk migrations in March. We would lose adult radio-collared birds, and then again in the fall at October-ish time frame when they were coming back through. So, I mean, and that's consistent with the same research down in Florida, Georgia, all over, right? It's the hawk migrations, Cooper's hawk, sharp shins, that's what's getting the adults, primarily, as far as predation. Nest predation, we didn't have cameras on nests, but you can discern some information, right? If a raccoon or a possum or skunk raids a nest, typically there's broken eggshells. There's some evidence of some destruction. Whereas if all the eggs are just gone, that's typically snakes. Or maybe half the eggs are gone. Well, it was a little snake, and they couldn't eat them all. And there's no sign of anything left. So at 50%, which is again consistent with other research, is snake predation. So snakes, honestly, are the worst nest predator we have for quail. All the others combined, skunks, possums, coons, whatever, even pack rats, things like that will take some eggs, matches the snakes. So it's complicated, right? Obviously, our avian predators are federally protected, but let's think even further. Back before they weren't, and people would shoot hawks. Okay, well, the hawks are eating the snakes. So this whole food web is is deep and complicated, and there's a lot of spokes coming off of this wheel. So you start manipulating, pulling a string, and all of a sudden the whole sweater falls apart. To your question, what landowners can do, there's research out there. Habitat's still the driver, right? I mean, you can't go into a fescue-dominated, poor habitat for quail, one covey on 500 acres, and think that trapping 50 raccoons is going to make 10 coveys. It's not going to work. We still have to have good brood rearing, good nesting. We've got to have escape cover. We've got to have all those basic things on the landscape. But there is some research out, especially in the southeast, showing that where habitat is really tricked out, really worked hard, then they're moving the needle even further with trapping. I'm a trapper. Frank's a trapper. I'm not going to say trapping doesn't have its place. I still trap. I enjoy trapping. But we're going to continue to push that if you're going out there with dog proofs and you're never lighting a prescribed burn, you're never running a chainsaw, you're never doing these other things, and you're trying to manage for quail, it's not going to work. It has to be a combination of all of these habitat things and trapping to make a difference.
Okay, so trapping's kind of more of the cherry on top of good habitat. Now, I'm thinking of the guy who might have, what do you think is an adequate acreage size to be like, I'm making an impact on the quail population? Is it 15 acres? Is it 50 acres? Do you have to have 100 acres?
Habitat wise, I guess it's all relative, but if you go from one covey to two coveys, you've doubled your population. So depending on your interpretation, you might pull that off on 40 acres and be thrilled to death. Now, that's not a huntable, sustainable, you can't hunt that population 6 times a season. So it's all relative. I guess it's how much use you want to get out of it and how much you plan on seeing. What we're finding, me personally, a whole career, actually just retired last week from the state. So an entire career of messing with this, and don't want to discourage people, landowners by any means. You can have some quail on your place, but to have a place that you can consistently harvest some birds every year, multiple hunts, I'm going to go out and say 1,000 acres minimum. Now, that doesn't just have to be your place. If we can get some neighbors working together, that's what we find on our public land. If we're the only show in town and the neighbor's habitat is very hostile, then it limits what we could do. If we could spread that love out, have our private lands folks helping those neighbors, all of a sudden there's an effect, a neighborhood effect, and we can grow more quail on our piece of dirt, whether it's public land or your private farm. So these landowner associations can become critical to getting more people involved around you, so you do beef up the acre.
No, I love that, kind of focusing the community together on an idea. And congratulations on the retirement. It sounds like you've had a very long and fabled career. So, as a conservationist, I'm like, thank you for your service, type of thing. So
it's been good. Yep.
Well, that should free up some time for quite a bit more hunting this year. Do you got any big trips planned?
That's my hope. I don't have a lot big. I don't know yet. Probably for sure going somewhere desert Southwest. Did that last year. Frank and I did. I'll probably do that again, but I don't know. I'm kind of leaving things open for the moment. I always go to Western Kansas. So yeah, I'll hit 2 or 3 states for sure.
And I was, your guys' story as coworkers and as friends and as hunting companions is fairly well documented at this point. I loved you talked about it 20, 30 minutes on the Upland Social podcast. I thought that was really great. And then the Something About a Bob White YouTube video was really great. I know what it's kind of like when you have a coworker or somebody you've worked with in your field, you really hit it off with. And I think it's so cool and inspirational for me that you guys have been able to do such great work for such a long time. and you're still friends. I mean, you haven't been out in the field wrestling and fighting over this, that, and the third, it seems like. So it sounds like you guys got a good thing going on over there, and I'm excited to see what you guys continue to do. If it's more content, more podcasts, or just general advocacy, it's for me, it's really inspirational, the work that you guys are doing together.
Well, thank you for that. And I think both of us have kind of moved into the points of our careers where we're trying to be more advocates of Bob White and of upland game birds in general. Because most of the species that we're talking about are declining. Most of the upland game bird species are declining. And so that's nothing new. People know this, but I don't think it's as widely known as it should be. So we're more kind of in our advocacy phase now. I still have a few more years left with the state, but still kind of moved into my advocacy phase as we do podcasts or as we write, articles for whatever publication. A lot of it you'll see is still practical, knowledgeable on habitat management, on hunting, on hunting, but also we're doing a lot of advocacy too.
Yeah. And it's like that type of thing. It's like no matter every upland species you kind of look into, whether it's partridge in the high mountains of Colorado or Alaska, or the sage grouse, or any of them, people, the kind of the repetitive motif I keep hearing is that these birds are in decline in their population. And I know there's a lot of different reasons, and I don't think it's one little thing, but I don't know. I guess, Kyle, starting with you, what do you think is kind of the main reasons upland species collectively are in decline? If you had to give it top three, what do you think that might be?
I mean, it's all wrapped up in the top one. It's habitat loss, but that habitat loss is so totally different for a sage grouse versus a bobwhite quail, right? Modern farming practices, the introduction of, and I'm not here to badmouth, Roundup Ready crops, but we had weedy crop fields back in the day, right? Now we have clean crop fields. The introduced species like fescue and Bahia grass down south, and all those things that are not quail friendly. You go to sage grouse world, and well, it's invasive cheatgrass, it's energy development, right? They're moving in and taking, so it's habitat loss wherever you go. It's just the causes are so drastically different. It comes from every angle, but every one of these birds seems to suffer that. You go up north, the rough grouse country, well, the lack of logging in places. So it's not progress in that case. It's the lack of harvest. And so you're losing the young forest and everything ages out. And it's crazy, but everywhere you look, it's some man-caused issue. Some places for the betterment of society, air quote betterment, or we're feeding the world. We're going to grow more crop. Well, that's going to continue. We're going to continue to get more pressure to grow more crops, to have higher yields. That's not going away. So we got to figure out ways to all make all this happen on the same acres over time. And unfortunately, a lot of these birds aren't nearly as adaptive. When you were talking about all these species in decline, it's actually, I've thought about this, and it's frustrating. How come I never find anything to hunt on the upswing? The only thing in my lifetime, I started hunting ducks in 1993, and there was a two drake mallard limit. Well, I got to see the upswing, and I got to see the turkeys blow up in the 90s. Of course, now we've had a turkey decline. Whitetail deer went up, but everything else I've loved to hunt my whole life has declined, and it's frustrating.
Well, and as a newer hunter myself, it's one of those things, because I get out there and I'm enamored by it, right? It's like, I'm an amateur upland hunter at absolute best, but even when I find a covey, I'm just like, this is the coolest thing ever. I was doing some not snow goose hunting, Canada goose hunting over there in Kansas, and we bumped a covey, and it was like just so much fun. And my buddy's lab pointed him out, and he's like, he's pointing. I was like, what do you mean? And then that kind of like got the ball rolling for me. And then we kind of started chasing him a little bit more targeted, but I'm right there with you. But over there in Kansas, you got 5 mallards, now, which is definitely quite the increase. And I like to spend quite a bit of time over there as well, but I'm right there with you. And I think as somebody who's trying to get more people into the things, ultimately, I think there's value. And the more value we place on an animal, the more protection it has. I was talking to a friend of mine in New Zealand, and they have a ton of invasive animals with no predators whatsoever, and they're just blasting them out of helicopters. And they don't have enough value on those animals to really protect them. And so I don't know if upland hunting as a whole is declining. I know my friends down here in Southwest Missouri don't participate in it that much because the narrative is that there's no bobwhite left. And so I think a little bit of recruitment, in that department could potentially help just to add more interest to it, more value, where then, this grassland is going to get turned into, God forbid, a data center or some crap like that. We can get enough people out there to be like, ain't no way, Jack. And so are you seeing upland participation, Frank? Are you seeing decline in participation?
Yeah, it's kind of variable. Certainly in Missouri, we have seen a long-term decline in upland game hunters and upland game harvest. Now, if you look on, and I'd say that holds for most of the country, certainly bobwhite country. Now, if you look on Instagram and other social media platforms, Kyle and I have noticed a sort of a resurgence in upland game hunting as more an adventure type adventure type pursuit, or one that's wholly centered on the dog, and that's tending to happen out west, where there has been a resurgence in their upland game bird populations. Their quail populations are exploding in the west. Hungarian partridges are doing well. Sharp-tailed grouse are doing well. And so they have more opportunity out there. And so you see a younger subset of folks coming on. If you go to Pheasant Fest, you'll start to see, which is kind of like the big NWTF convention for upland game bird hunters. It's called Pheasant Fest. If you attend that, you'll see, of course, a wide range of hunters. You'll see the older guys, but you'll also see a lot of guys your age that are strongly into it. And if you get to know those folks, they tend to be more Western hunters, pheasant hunters, partridge hunters, sharp-tailed grouse hunters, Western quail hunters. So there has been an upsurge of that, and that's good to see. I don't know that we'll ever replicate it here in Missouri, or get back to where we were here in Missouri. We have just too many headwinds fighting us in terms of long or large scale quail restoration. We've shown we can restore quail in small areas, but we've yet to have the incentive on private land, because Missouri is 93% privately owned, and then a third of that is, second growth post oak woodland that's not going to be quail habitat. But we've certainly not seen that large scale quail renaissance that we would hope, and I doubt that we'll see it in our lifetimes, barring major drought or something that we can't foresee. But yeah, there is a resurgence in certain places.
Yeah, and what kind of comes to mind as you're saying, you're seeing more Western hunters participating in upland hunting. It kind of makes me think, I like to hunt elk and other big game out west as well, and it's a much more mobile, physical sort of hunting compared to tree stand whitetail hunting, for example. And if you kind of draw that same correlation to an upland hunt versus, say, turkey hunting. Turkey hunting is probably more popular than it's ever been by population. But you can kind of sit in one place. You can call them into you. You don't have to do a whole lot of work. Whereas an upland hunt, it's not uncommon to, 12, 15 miles if you're really getting after it. And so I just think that I don't know. I just think maybe these eastern states, they like things just a little easier. They like the game to come to us a little bit more than to go out and get after it. I do think one of the other barriers to entry could be upland hunting kind of has this perception of, a little upper crust, right? Like you could take out a $20,000 over under gun, have your $5,000 pointer. It could get really expensive really quickly. But this is the same thing I tell about people with duck hunting. As I said, go get your granddaddy's 870, go down to Academy, get you some $50 decoys, get some like neoprene waders. You're all in for a couple $100. You can go find a couple ducks. So I think maybe kind of clearing some of the fog on that barrier to entry to upland hunting. And I've heard you guys say previously that Bob White was kind of that every man's upland hunt. Kyle, do you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, Frank and I have talked about this exact thing, and it frustrates us when we see it on social media. Sometimes being portrayed as this, the pomp and circumstance around it. Look, we have high reverence for quail or any upland bird. Don't get us wrong, but we certainly don't want to give off a persona as an upland bird hunting culture that you have to have the Satori, because the reality is back in 1960s, it was every man's game. People were shooting $50 pump shotguns. And my dad, this is no joke. There was so many quail. This is he was in high school in the 50s. He had a Cocker Spaniel, which that makes sense, right? People are using those for upland birds in some cases. But this was just a pet, a Cocker Spaniel and a German Shepherd. And he would take those dogs hunting. And there was so many quail that they just figured it out. The Cocker Spaniel would get birdie and flush, and the German Shepherd started bringing them back to him. I mean, it was just a thing, but that's not an expensive deal. Like his folks were poor. He grew up on a farm, So yeah, we try to caution people, hey, let's not make that. Sure, if you want to have a fancy gun, that's great. I'm not against it, but let's not project that aura that's what upland hunting is, because we need people to get into this, because without people in it, you lose the voices. Duck hunting, duck habitat, DU, wetlands construction, all of that has been highly successful because duck hunters are very vocal. They are a big group and they are loud. And if you work with state government very long, you find out the duck hunters are going to get what they want because they speak up, they rally together. And in the upland world, people just faded away. As the quail went away, they just kind of faded away. Well, I don't have bird dog anymore. Last bird dog died. People just hang it up. Obviously, that's not Frank and I, but this next generation that's coming in, and I like the fact that you mentioned, you see a cubby and you get excited. So it's a different level of expectation, and that's what we need. We need people to be excited, lower the expectations. The 20 cubby days are gone. I've experienced it, but it's gone. We're not going to have that here in Missouri, but that's okay. Let's celebrate the 3 cubby day, the 5 cubby day, and find satisfaction in that. And again, it doesn't need to cost you an arm and a leg to do it.
Yeah. Well, and I think of upland hunting, it's the type of thing where it's like, it is sporting, right? Like deer, like, deer can be a very, very good sustenance for a lot of people. We eat deer meat 3 times a week. But you don't, need to hunt quail to survive. So my buddy Casey, who I was telling you guys about, he's got this kind of philosophy of, I go to a known covey location. He says, I'll empty both barrels and then I'm out of there and I'm moving on to a different location. Even if that means I got to drive another 15, 20 minutes to a different area or different, drive around to the other side of this grassland, whatever it may be. Because he's very, very conservation minded as well. And so, one of the rumors that I kind of always hear is that, the covey is a family unit. And if you kill too many birds out of that unit, the whole unit will die. Is there any credence to that? Or is that kind of more of a wives' tale?
That's a wives' tale. In most cases, in a very limited situation, if you had a one covey farm, yes, that could be a problem, right? If you've got a one covey farm and the nearest neighboring covey is 2 miles away, you've got a doomed situation anyway. Let's be honest. But coveys trade family members all the time. We were trapping chicks and radio calling them. So this is, of course, during brooding season. This is June, July, and August. And we would catch broods and have 3 different age chicks with the same one hen. So it's brood amalgamation. But they do this, when you go out in the fall and they whistle. They do the covey calls in late October and in November. Sometimes we'll use that even to scout quail. We'll use that to figure out where coveys are at for our hunting. But that's a social deal. They're calling saying, hey, we're over here. Yep. Another covey answers, hey, we're over here. And as they pass each other, they trade. It's a way to trade genetic material. You trade family members, but there's also a desire to maintain an optimum covey size. So I give this example a lot when we're giving speeches. You go shoot, you flush a 14 bird covey that's always in, that west hedgerow over on the Smith place, right? And you flush them the first day and there's 14 birds, you kill 2 of them. And you go back on Thanksgiving and you flush them again, sure enough, there's 12. And you shoot 2 more. Now there's 10. You go back Christmas Day, you flush that covey again, and there's 16 birds. And you say, what in the world happened? Well, the ideal covey size is about 11 and a half birds. So 11 to 12. They can make a perfect circle. Everybody's rear end is touching. They stay warm. Everybody's looking out for safety. If you get more birds than that, you got birds that can't fit in the circle just right. If you have less than that, you can't make a perfect circle. So they're trading around. So if you go on public land late season, you're still going to see a lot of 10, 12 bird coveys. But there may be fewer coveys overall. Maybe that public land started with 10 coveys and now there's 6. They've just pooled together their remaining members to optimize that covey size. So for the most part, yeah, it's decimating a covey down to nothing. They're smart. They figure it out. They figure ways to loot. Now, I'm not suggesting people should kill 9 birds out of a covey. Don't get me wrong. Killing a couple, 3, and moving on is conservation minded, but the birds have a way of gathering up friends and figuring it out.
So if say a guy had a covey or 2 on his place and say that covey, one of them gets up to about 16, 17, 18 birds, will some of them start splitting off and kind of joining that other one? That's kind of how one covey becomes 2 becomes 3, so on and so forth. It's just, it's a little overcrowded. So one guy's like, hey, I'm going over to the Smith's place. I know they're got a couple left over here.
Yeah, I've seen it really depend on the weather. So sometimes they'll go back and forth, like some really harsh conditions, which this doesn't really fit with the perfect circle that I just described, but I've seen them, bunch up 20, 25, and then that weather breaks and you're back to those. That's 2 different coveys. So yes, there's times you'll go out and it's a 16 bird covey, and then 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, you may go find an 8 bird covey and a 7 bird covey. So there's just a lot of trading around. Sometimes that may only be 100 yards apart. Sometimes it might be a quarter mile apart. They move a lot. They move a lot more than people realize. We had birds moving over a mile in 24 hours. We had coveys as a covey migrating, air quote, a mile or two in just a few days. They cover a lot more ground than people think.
No, that's incredible. I mean, all of that you just said is kind of the hidden world of bobwhite that I feel like the majority of people wouldn't see. You might be able to see them getting up in a circle if you got a kind of a more good view of them off of a back deck or something like that. But especially that migration, a lot of people think they won't leave their 10-acre little section there. So that's really fascinating. One thing I wanted to ask you before we kind of moved on to this next topic here is still on hunting. You guys, I'm assuming, are hunting with dogs. Do you guys both have dogs, and what breeds do you like for the work that you guys have been doing lately?
Yeah, we both have dogs, and I think throughout our lives we've had every kind of dog that you can have. Right now, through various circumstances, we've both settled on German short hairs, and we'll probably do that. We'll probably be that way for a while. So that's the kind of dogs we run. But yeah, throughout our careers, or excuse me, throughout our lives, starting as little kids, we've had, Brittany's, pointers, setters, the whole gamut. They're all good. But we're kind of on the short hair train now.
What is it that you like? Go ahead, Kyle.
Oh, I was going to say, and nothing against it. We've always had our dads both had the traditional 4. We never got into the bearded dogs and all the other stuff, and there's nothing wrong with them. I've hunted with them. But the setters, pointers, Brittany's, and short hairs is what, growing up, we always had a couple of those breeds in the backyard, and Frank's dad was the same way. And we're on these short hairs because they came out of one of my dad's dogs, and we just hit this bloodline that we don't want to give up or screw up. So we're both working off of the same bloodline at this point, and it's pretty good. So we're hanging with it as long as we can.
Man, I love hunting with dogs. Admittedly, I'm raising a lab right now because something about those ducks that just gets in me. I become obsessed, and I'm hoping that I've talked to some trainers about teaching them to do some upland stuff, and there's some decent techniques to get a lab to at least participate in the field. Kyle, are you training them from puppies? It sounds like with that bloodline, you're really close to it. And so, I don't know if you've worked with labs much, but I'm kind of curious about upland dog training, what that kind of program looks like.
Yeah, we're both doing our own training. Just circumstance in life, I guess. My dad was the same way, just basic obedience training, starting out pretty young. And I've just in the last, I don't know, I guess the last 2 puppies introduced the place board. I didn't even know what that was 20 years ago, but working with a place board and just yard work, basic stuff to, get them to fetch a bumper and just be excited and chase, or fetching a wing or even have a frozen bird, and then working on obviously come and then introducing whoa breaking them. Beyond that, it's wild birds after that. It's just repetition. And yeah, they're going to screw some up, but it's just repetition after repetition. And the more wild bird conduct, there's no exception, no shortcut for wild birds. That's what makes or breaks a dog.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I started training, you get a dog, and especially a retriever, it's like, man, we're going to get in the water and we're going to be throwing bumpers and we're going to be doing this, we're going to be doing that. And then you realize it's like, oh no, it's all just different levels of obedience training. And then their natural instincts just start coming out after that. And it's like, oh, okay, well, I'll just make a good dog then.
Yeah, they know what to do. You just got to get them to come when they need to come and not blow the covey up before you get there. You can get, sure, there's some extra polishing, and Frank and I, neither one do. We don't have dogs broke to wing and shot. We're not against it. We're pretty basic, but I need a dog to hold still till I get up there and flush the covey, and then would be nice if they go find a bird and bring it back to me. Yeah. Beyond that, Now I don't have to chase them all over the country. When I call their name, it would be nice if they come 95% of the time.
Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you guys about, I'm sure you're familiar with the Meat Eater podcast. There was a really popular episode featuring a guy named Dr. Ron Kendall out of West Texas. The episode was titled, "What Happened to the Bobwhite Quail?" And in this particular episode, he was saying, and now granted, this is West Texas, slightly different habitat than we have here, but he was going on about this particular eye worm that the quail were getting, and he was accrediting this to the decline in that population. I re-listened to the episode again recently. As soon as he brings this up, he goes on to kind of pitch this product that he invented, and then starts talking about his landowner buddies and outfitters, how they can make all this money, so on and so forth. And, to his credit, it did get FDA approved. There's obviously a lot of questions on, should we be introducing medication to wild animals? I guess the question I have for you guys, and Frank, if you want to maybe get us started here, are you familiar with this episode and this situation, and what's your take on it?
Well, I've not listened to the episode, but I have become very familiar with it through the sort of uprising it caused through the bobwhite conservation world from a research and habitat standpoint. I'm a part of the National Bobwhite and Grasslands Initiative, and that's where the country's leading bobwhite ecologists and biologists gather to share ideas and to come up with research projects and plans for bobwhite conservation going forward into the future. And it caused a real uprising. And I don't know, again, I didn't listen to it. I don't know the exact scientific process that was used in this, but there's some belief among many ecologists that the science behind it in terms of control, impact, the basic scientific study that was set up was flawed. But larger than that and beyond that, it took away from the idea of habitat. Again, that's the number one thing we're trying to promote is habitat, whether it's in West Texas or in Oklahoma or Missouri or wherever. That's the one thing that we're trying to promote. And something like that, though it may have some efficacy, I can't say one way or another on a large scale, it really takes our eye off the ball of habitat. And I think there is some fear among many quail biologists across most of the eastern part of the country that it did that. There was some fear that it did take our eye off the habitat ball and put it on this shiny thing that here is the silver bullet to fix our quail decline. And that's what I know about it.
Let me interject for a second, too. Let's keep in mind, and most people probably don't realize, but Missouri Department of Conservation, or hunters in Missouri and several other states, we sent heads to Texas for years to examine for eyeworms. Okay, so 0 were ever found in Missouri quail. So even if this is the magic cure-all. Mind you, the habitat's totally different in Texas. If they get rain, they have habitat in a lot of places. So, but even if in Texas, hey, this solves the eyeworms and your populations jump up on your farm, we don't have eyeworms in Missouri. They haven't been documented yet. So that's not our quail decline. That's not Tennessee's quail decline. That's not South Georgia's quail decline. So it doesn't map out for most of the quail range. It's a very small part of the world that is suffering this eye.
No, that's what I was going to ask you next, is if that you guys seen any of these eyeworm issues in this area, because I think why the episode got so much traction is because people want a solution. I mean, clearly we want a solution to get bobwhite populations as robust as they can be, but knowing now that this and like I said, I felt as if though it very much read just like a slick talking sales pitch for this magic bullet for this big problem on, look, he did it on the biggest outdoor podcast there is. So he probably sold quite a bit of that stuff, but if you're going to start deploying this product in the area that it has no use for, it's kind of becomes a moot point. So I really do appreciate you guys' input on that. And I think continuing to steer the conversation back to habitat and is where I'd like to align myself with as well. So I appreciate you guys kind of setting the compass on that. Now, on the radio collar project that you did, one thing that I don't know if Kyle, you're here for that, we talked about the public input that people have in Missouri's Department of Conservation. I do believe that, this is probably one of the most vocal communities of hunters that I've ever seen towards the conservation department, good, bad, or indifferent. Oftentimes they don't agree with the public sentiment. I feel as if though it's lazy, uneducated perspectives. But with a study like that you guys did with this radio collar, what was the public response like? Was it optimistic? Did you guys feel good about what people had to say about the study, other than probably the occasional Facebook comment of just complete, you know what I'm saying? How do you guys feel about the response of people to that study?
Yeah, we didn't get any much negativity that I know about. For one, I don't recall that our study being pushed on Facebook, honestly, not on MDC's social media. It gained some attention, I guess, because we were given speeches throughout those years of research, right? So some people started knowing we were doing it, and honestly, yeah, we got a few. You run into just Joe Bob Hunter, and that, you just need to plant more Milo. That's where you. Back when there was Milo everywhere, we had quail everywhere, and I could tell you how to fit. We still run into some of that. Okay, well, that's Milo isn't nesting habitat, and it's not brood rearing habitat. It might have been in 1957, but it's not now. Anyway, but overall, no, it did attract some hunters. I think people, and we do the same thing. I'm going to be honest. If you see that someone's doing research on a critter that you want to hunt, they're either doing it in a spot that there's a lot of them because they got a radio collar them, or there's hardly any left. So once you discern, oh, they're doing that in a place that there's lots of them, well, then that's where I want to go hunt. So we actually saw an increase in hunting on some of those public areas when we were doing the research. And maybe some people wanted to shoot a banded quail too. I don't know if that was some motivation. Probably was. But again, quail are smart and they figured it out, and they're elusive. So we didn't have, a huge uptick and, oh my gosh, they're killing all our colored quail. In fact, we did some band recoveries and never even broke double digits. So it was less than 10% harvest. So pretty minimal, pretty, I guess, average to below average for public land harvest.
Frank, do you kind of agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, that's Kyle's spot on there. We did see an uptick of hunters. Yeah, it's cool to kill a banded quail. I killed one in Kansas one time. That was pretty sweet. So yeah, we saw an uptick of hunters. Really didn't get a lot of, the worst thing you get is maybe, they'll never recover quail. They're just wasting their time. We may have heard that on a personal level, but nothing big online. We had a lot of support. People were supportive of what we were doing because at least we were doing something for bobwhites.
Yeah, I was surprised to see I understand that the conservation department is obviously has so many different things that they're trying to push out and promote to the public. But I mean, I think there was really only one article on the website. I don't know if it was on Facebook or anything like that. And to me, it just seems like one of those ones. It's like, man, this is a really optimistic sort of story and a study that, hey, we spent good money on. You just feel like there would be a little bit more effort to promote it there. But, I can't even begin to speculate on what their sort of primary motivations are at all. I try to be supportive and trust the scientists and the biologists doing the work. And I can kind of be a talking head and say, hey, this is what's going on. This is what I think is kind of happening here. So, one of the things I was looking at your guys' consultation website here, the Land and Legacy, is this, what I'm trying to say here is that I've been seeing a lot, and I've been really fascinated with the recent like thermal drone technology, primarily happening around white-tailed deer. Have you worked with anybody or seen, is that technology helping at all with any new quail studies or any upland studies? Have either one of you heard anything about those drones being used to kind of help survey? Because I know I was listening to a Delta Waterfowl podcast recently, and they were talking about nest surveys were pretty invasive up in the prairie pothole region with 4-wheelers and chains and all this type of stuff. And now they're able to get out there with drone thermal technologies and have a much smaller footprint on the land. Has your consultation group kind of started implementing any of that, or is that just not where you guys are at right now?
They do quite a bit of drone stuff on the deer side. Land and Legacy is really heavy in deer. I mean, we do upland bird stuff for them as well, but they're primarily deer driven. And they utilize a lot of it on that side. I'm not aware of Land and Legacy using drones on the upland game bird side, but I do know of some situations outside of Land and Legacy where some folks have done some thermal covey surveys at night to try to just get a covey count on a property, and you can see them. I mean, I've seen the video of it. You can see it looks like a little basketball size with a bunch of tennis balls sitting there. You can tell what's a covey versus what's a rabbit or something else. So, I think there's some effectiveness there. And they're using it in research, of course, to try to locate broods to capture and band and easier ways to track them down. It's got some traction.
I think it's such a dual-edged sword, right? Because, in the wrong hands, that tool can be so insanely effective and it completely eliminate fair chase. But for research purposes, I'm hoping that's kind of where the buck stops on this type of thing. But so one of the, I don't want to take up your guys' whole evening. I know we're getting close to dinner time here, but for other newer hunters, like myself or people who are trying to get into upland, like I said, so we can add more value to these animals, what are some sort of tips and tactics that you found to be effective to help hunters, find coveys, have success? Frank, do you got any hot tips that you want to get us kind of started with here?
Yeah. And the best thing to do really is to find a mentor, because upland game bird hunting is one of the most difficult sports to enter in terms of knowing where to start. And you do really, to be successful, have to have a trained dog. And very rarely is somebody just going to go, get a dog and train it, or maybe they are. Maybe they'll get a finished dog and they'll go out and they'll start hunting, and they'll stumble around and struggle and try to figure out, because they won't know where to hunt, they won't know where to start. So look for a mentor. I mean, there's plenty of folks out there that are willing to take somebody on that's safe, that they can tell knows what they're doing, because upland game bird hunting is also one of the ones where you have to really, really, really watch safety, because birds are going everywhere. They're going in front of you, behind you. The dogs are out in front of the shot charge. I mean, there's a lot going on, so you need somebody that's pretty steady hand. So first thing is to find a mentor that'll take you out. And, I think there's plenty of folks that'll do that. And the second, one of the things that we always recommend, if you go to if you have a spot picked out that you want to hunt, go very early in the morning and just listen for Bob Whites to call from the roost. Now, they won't do a traditional Bob White call. They'll do a different call, but you can get online and find that call really easy and go out and just listen for Bob Whites and figure out, okay, there's a covey over here, there's a covey over here, and just start heading that direction and hunting. And you'll be surprised. You won't find all of them. Believe me, even though you know that 10 minutes ago there was a covey right here, you won't find all of them because they either haven't laid down much of a scent trail or they've picked up and moved in the meantime or something. But you'll find enough that you'll be successful and you'll use it as in your bag of tricks. And we do that too. We go out and listen early in the morning, pinpoint where coveys are located. And it also ups your confidence level that you're in an area where at least you have birds around and you're not in some desert.
And if you do find someone that's willing to take you out, that's going to help you understand how to read the cover, what things to look for. But the key here that I want to emphasize is you have to be respectful of where these people are taking you. You cannot go, somebody takes you under their wing and takes you, for a day or 2 days or 5 days. You can't be back there hunting all their spots. You will be banished forever. You take that information, you learn how to read the cover. Okay, this is what I'm looking for, this type of structure, this type of cover. And then you go find spots that look like that. You build your own portfolio. If you start spot poaching your mentor, it's the fastest way to being kicked out of this, club, I guess. And I've seen it done many times, and it's bad form.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we've covered a lot of topics here, and I really appreciate you guys' input on it. It sounds like you guys are going to be at the Quail Forever in Springfield here on the 10th. So if people want to come hear you guys speak in person, that's going to be a great place for it. And then you guys are kind of collectively Upland Flush on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And then are you guys affiliated with the Project Upland magazine just as writers, or is that the deal there?
Yep. We're just writers, contributors with Project Upland, pretty regular.
Yeah, another great resource. I found myself kind of just looking into some of your articles and just getting lost in that website. Just there's a lot of solid information over there. So, well, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Yep, thank you.